What's up guys, it's your boy Rich, and today we're going to talk about some of my favorite manual wound watches and some of the pros and cons versus an automatic or self-winding watch versus a manual wound watch, and why I just simply adore manual wound watches. So we're going to start off with my Feynman 1 by Feynman Timekeepers, and this is just a beautiful case, and look at that hand-painted lacquered dial. But we are talking about the movements, and by now we might or we might not know that all watches were a manual wound at one point until the invention of the rotor. So I'm not going to go into all the details, but the rotor is attached to the movement. So when our wrist moves, it winds the watch back up again by tightening the mainspring. A manual wound doesn't have a rotor, so we have to wind it by hand for it to work. And I'm going to set this down and show you some of the information that was provided by Feynman Timekeepers on here. And this one is powered by the ETA 7001, and I think they also talk about the power reserve and the accuracy, and it's up to 15 seconds per day. I've been actually getting between 8 to 9 seconds a day, which is really good for a manual wound movement, and it's water resistant to 50 meters. So it's not going to be ideal for water resistance. I wouldn't take this swimming, but surviving any splashes from the sink for washing our hands or doing the dishes or running from the car to the office in the rain, it should be just fine. So this is a really lovely movement here. And one of the pros of a manual wound movement is if we're someone who likes to appreciate looking and admiring our movement through the exhibition case back, well, the manual wound definitely has an advantage on that, because on an automatic movement, and this is my Formex Essence automatic, it will have a rotor, and the rotor will take up a large part of the real estate of that exhibition case back. Now, some automatic movements and rotors are customized and highly decorated, and those are the exceptions, but overall I think we're going to get a much more advantage of that movement with a manual wound movement. It's just a lot cleaner and clearer without anything obstructing this view. So that's just a beautiful looking watch here, the Feynman 1. So one of the other disadvantages to the watch is that most manual wound watches will not have a screw down crown. So most of them aren't going to be ideal for swimming, but there is an exception here in this lineup here, and we'll get to that. So my next favorite watch, and manual wound or automatic, any category, is my Itenoi Rally. This is just one of my favorite watches, period. Itenoi just makes lovely watches. He is a legendary watchmaker. He is a real artisan watchmaker here, and this is inspired hence by the name Rally for race cars. And we can see part of the movement at 9 o'clock, which is looking like a grill of a car, and then the power reserve indicator at 3 o'clock there, looking like the gas gauge, the full and the empty. Very clever by Itenoi. This is not an inexpensive watch either. It's about $5,500. But again, Itenoi is a legendary watchmaker in the business. And this movement is the 6498 manual wound with 38 hours of power reserve. It's also water resistant to just 50 meters. But look at that movement. This is a movement worth admiring anytime. So I really enjoyed this watch. It's just been great to me by Itenoi. Now, my next manual wound movement is going to be my Memphis Belle HM4. Now, this has a solid case back, and this is an exception to where a manual wound movement can be suitable for diving or swimming. This one is powered by the ETA Unitas 6497, and though we can't see it here, I will put up an image of what this gorgeous movement looks like. It has an O-ring in here, which is like a gasket to keep the sealing out the water. It has a power reserve of 40 hours. It's water resistant to 300 meters by ISO 6425 standard. So it has all the hallmarks of a regular automatic diver's watch with a screw down crown. Would I feel comfortable taking this? And I'm going to interrupt just for a moment, because look at that beautiful green marbling dial there. It's just a gorgeous looking dial that's aging really nicely. I don't think I would take this into the ocean, because this is priced at about $1,800 to $2,000. Now, if there was a less expensive watch with the same guarantee and the same specs, sure, I'd be willing to give that a try. But to be fair, I don't take any of my watches into the ocean or in the pool, so it's not just a manual wound. But if I'm being honest, that's my comfort level on taking a manual wound into the ocean, is if it had these kind of specs. So Memphis Bell has actually been making watches for the Italian military as for diving. So they know what they're doing, and this is obviously a watch that can take that. It doesn't have a screw down crown, but it does have all the other, like I said, signature hallmarks for serious divers. The next one is my Vertex M100, and this one is powered by the ETA 7001 movement. It has a water resistance of, I believe, 100 meters with 42 hours of power reserve. This has a solid case back because Vertex was part of the Dirty Dozen watches that were commissioned by the British military during World War II. It's an authentic Dirty Dozen watch, and they were staying true with the original watch, which had a solid case back here. So that's the reason Vertex went with a solid case back. This has just been a fantastic watch to me. I can't recommend Vertex watches enough. Just a really great watch. So if we're looking at all the other watches and some of the other, maybe a negative about a manual wound movement, it could be the rotor, because the rotor is generally going to be thicker and heavier, and some people will consider that a con. To me, I don't consider that a con because it's not, that weight differential isn't going to be significant. And I do like to feel the weight of my watch, unless it's something like titanium. An automatic movement will also be more convenient, especially if it's our everyday watch, because they're going to have generally a power reserve of between 40 hours to 70 hours of power reserve. And if that becomes their daily watch, it really becomes a grab and go. And, you know, a lot like a quartz. And in fact, I think we have more quartz options than we do manual wound options. And if we're talking about mainstream brands, there are some. Panerai has a manual wound movement too. I just don't think there's enough of the manual wound movements, but I think there actually should be more. A disadvantage of a manual wound movement could be argued that if this is your only watch and you're winding it every day or every other day, generally a power reserve is between 30 hours to 45 or so hours on a manual wound, or even up to 50 hours. I believe that's what my Memphis Bell is. Well, the argument can be made that we can wear out the crown prematurely if we're winding it that often. So, you know, do I recommend a manual wound to be our only watch in our collection? No, I do not. And here we can see some of that gold that is sprinkled here onto the dial here, because that's some real gold there that's sprinkled on there. Just a nice touch by Itenoi. But what I've been saying before that little gold rant is that I still recommend that we have automatics in our collection, because for that reason of not having to wind the crown as often. But it also makes us appreciate a manual wound movement a lot, because like for me, it may be a little bit of a cliche, but when I'm taking the time to wind my watch, I enjoy connecting with the watch when I'm winding it. It makes me realize what I have. If we're someone who's always running late, you know, for work in the morning, then I can understand a manual wind can be a little bit cumbersome. It can become a little bit tedious. For me, that's not the case, because most of my watches in my collection are self-winding. So that is a long reasons or different reasons of why I think we should have both automatics and a manual wind in our collection. It just really makes us appreciate manual wounds a lot. So I think by having the different variety of watches, it just makes us really appreciate. A manual wound is just something that's been just really just been treating me well, and something that makes me appreciate watchmaking a lot more. I know not everybody likes to geek out like that, but I do appreciate the history of watchmaking, knowing that all of our watches were manual wound at some point. So this is my sharing of some of my manual wound movements, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you the next time.